Welcome everyone, good evening. I'd like to begin the program with a chapter of Psalms, Becher, which I've handed out. If anyone needs a copy, I have more, but please rise and we'll recite chapter 121, Kuf Chaf Aleph. We'll say responsibly in the Hebrew and then we'll go back and read it again in the English. Shir Lamalo Yisasoy Naya Velri Me'ayin Yavo Yezri Shir Lamalo Ezri Me'im Adonai Yosei Shemayim V'Odes Al Yitein Lamoit Raglecha Al Yonum Shemrecha Hinei lo yonum v'lo yishon shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha yad yaminecha Yomam Hashemesh lo yakeka v'yoreach b'layla Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra yishmor es nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzizcha v'yecha mi'ata v'yad olam. Left hand column together in English. A song for ascents. I shall raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help is from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to falter. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your guardian, the Lord is your shadow, he is by your right hand. By day the sun will not smite you, nor will the moon at night. The Lord will guard you from all evil, he will guard your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from now and to eternity. Achenu kol beis Yisrael hanesunim batzara v'shivya hoimdim bein beyom bein biyabasha amokim yirachim aleim yotziyim mitzar levacha me'afelu lo'ero mishugad legula hashta b'agalav yizman tariv and oimar omein. May the Almighty have mercy upon all those of our Jewish brothers and sisters who are in distress and captivity, and Hashem should bring them home speedily in our days. Amen. Amen. Please be seated. So first of all, thank you to this evening's sponsors. Just going to mention the major sponsors of the evening, Roger and Rebecca Fine and Joe and Susan Perlman. Tonight's program has a lot of H's in it. Hamas, hatred, history, maybe we could add a couple more, Hezbollah, Harvard, and it's very horrific and very harrowing. Everything that's been going on for the past 70 odd days. And perhaps what's most mind-boggling is trying to come to grips and understand this visceral hatred that we see, not only from Hamas, but from their advocates, from their supporters. It's very hard for us to understand how it's possible that other seemingly otherwise intelligent people are defending and supporting this cause and not even having the simple morality to speak out and to condone it. So we want to try and understand the nature of this visceral hatred, what we can do about it, and try and get a better understanding of it. We're very fortunate to have with us this evening Rabbi Mordechai Becher. Rabbi Becher has been speaking at Torah Links. I think the first time was back in the year 2000, not after, soon after you transplanted yourself from Israel. And we've had the pleasure of hearing Rabbi Becher on so many different occasions. Currently, he is an instructor at Yeshiva University, still a featured lecturer for Gateways, the author of the very popular book, Gateway to Judaism. Phenomenal book, just to give you a user-friendly understanding of basic concepts and ideas in Jewish philosophy and Jewish practice. We have a few, Rabbi Becher did bring a few along. It's already in its 10th printing by ArtScroll. So, without any further ado, it's a great honor to introduce Rabbi Mordechai Becher.
very much. It is a pleasure to be here. King David, we just read one of his psalms. King David writes in another psalm, Hinei matov umanaim, shevet achim gam yachad. How good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to sit together. He uses two words, good and pleasant. Because not everything that's good is pleasant. Quinoa comes to mind. And not everything that's pleasant is good for you, like cream puffs, for example. King David says when we come together, when we sit together as brothers and sisters, that is both good, healthy, and it's also pleasant. So it's always great to be here, and just with any gathering. I was just in, speaking of Harvard, I was in Boston over Shabbat, and this morning I gave a class, and the rabbi, the Maor rabbi for Harvard University was there. So he said, it's not exaggerated. I mean, some of things, but yeah, there is hatred there. And let me begin first of all with just basic emotional response. This war, the attack, traumatized anyone, just about every Jew in the world, right? I mean, let alone those who directly suffered from it. It was traumatic. There's no question about it. And we had such a range of emotions that went through us, and they're still hard to deal with. I just want to point out, the Torah tells us, the Talmud actually says it, in Tractate Brachot, it says, Lo nitna Torah l'malachei hasharet. The Torah was not given to angels. Angels are emotionless, spiritual robots. The Torah was given to humans, with all of our faults, with all of our emotions, and with all of our strengths and difficulties and frailties and so on and so forth. And the Sefer HaChinuch, an anonymous work written in Barcelona, 13th century, when he talks about the prohibition, there's a prohibition against taking revenge. But it's type of interesting. He says that if someone is right now, as Americans would say, in your face, right, to respond to them is not prohibited. Why, he says? Because you cannot expect a person to be a stone. Person's not, we're not a stone. So if people experience emotions like anger and hatred and a desire for revenge and confusion and maybe anger at God, etc., all those are within the normal range of human emotion, and that's not something to feel guilty about. Something to work on, to work through, something to channel into appropriate ways, but it's not something that's a sin. And people are scared, right? People are nervous. That's also normal. That's normal anxiety. That's normal, right? I'm sure, and I was told there are people here whose children are serving in Israel. I have two sons who are serving. One went from here, one was already there, one was injured, discharged from the army due to a shrapnel injury. Thank God he's fine. Woke up from his operation. First thing he said was, I want a shawarma and a Turkish coffee. And the nurse said, maybe an ice water. He said, shawarma. So they sent him downstairs to Hadassah. They got a shawarma, kosher shawarma. So I can understand that. I had the bizarre, a sentence I never thought I'd hear from my wife. Because another son went to yeshiva in Israel about 2 months ago, and we're packing his suitcase, because any Jew who goes to Israel is a pack mule, basically carrying who knows what for everyone. And so we're packing, and my wife says, don't put the squishmallows for my granddaughters too close to the ceramic vest, because the Velcro can tear it. I said, did you just hear what you said? Don't put the squishmallow, they're squishy pillows for those who know, right? And next to the ceramic vest, which you're sending for my son's unit, right? Because the Velcro will that's a sign of the times, right? That's, and it's interesting when the Torah tells the Jews to go to war against the Midianites in biblical times, it says, send elef lamateh. That means 1,000 per tribe. But the phrase elef lamateh, 1,000 per tribe, is repeated 3 times. The phrase comes in 3 times. And the Midrash, ancient rabbinic source, says, why is that phrase said 3 times? Because the Torah does not mean only 1,000 per tribe. The Torah means 3,000 per tribe. That's why it says the phrase 3 times. 1,000 in combat, 1,000 logistics, and 1,000 praying. That was the biblical motif. Nowadays, I think that we have, I think you need 10 soldiers in logistical support for every 1 soldier in combat. It's about a 10-to-1 ratio. And the truth is, we know that Jews all over the world, right, aside from the Jews who are in combat, who are fighting what we call a milchemet mitzvah, an obligatory war in defense of the Jewish people, there are also virtually the whole Jewish world is in logistical support and in the other 1,000 of prayer. I mean, how many people have not, donated money and sent equipment and, shelves at Target and, sold out of all types of bizarre type of things, right? Duct tape and et cetera, right? So we're all, in that sense, part of this war, and we all know and feel that we need to contribute and do something. So there have been paradigms for this throughout history. Of course, the most famous paradigm, we just celebrated Hanukkah, but Hanukkah was a little different. But Purim, we had people who wanted to eradicate the Jewish people from the face of the planet. Haman and his cohorts wanted to eradicate, much like Hamas. They say it straight up, that's what they want to do, get rid of every Jew. Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, even the Palestinian Authority, all want to eliminate the Jewish people. When people yell and scream from the river to the sea, that means the elimination of the Jewish people in Israel. What are they going to do? What are they going to transport? That's the word which comes to mind, which is an unfortunate term. But yes, that's what they want to do. Right? What are the Jews going to go back to? Iraq, Syria, Libya, Lebanon, Egypt, etc.? Is that what they're back to Poland, right? Etc. The friendly atmosphere of Eastern Europe, right? So what they want to do is eliminate the Jewish people. So we had a precedent, and the Jews reacted in 3 ways. Jews did 3 things then. They prayed, which is what we just did now, and that is a classic Jewish response, is we pray. They also defended themselves. They killed 30,000 of those who were planning the pogroms. And in an interesting, one of the other things they did was, and this is enshrined in Jewish law for all time, which is that on Purim, they engaged in trying to sustain and help each other. Right? As we all know, one of the mitzvot of Purim is mishloach manot, to send presents of food to each other. And there's another of the mitzvot of Purim is give charity to people who need. And there's another mitzvah of Purim, which is to have a large meal, which you invite a bunch of people. So if people are trying to eliminate us, what do? The exact opposite. We try to sustain each other. If people are trying to destroy us, we defend ourselves. But there are many different facets to our response. And those are 3 that you see from the Purim paradigm that we engaged in, which is prayer and combat, and also the joining together of Jewish people. And that's why I started with that quote from King David, because that's so important nowadays, that there are people who are actually out there all over the world who are trying to destroy us, literally destroy us. So one of the things we have to do is sustain each other and bond together in as many ways as we can. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point, and as Rabbi Gross said, that the attack by Hamas was horrific and beyond description, and it's difficult to still even talk about it without just breaking down. But that did not surprise me in the same way as the support for Hamas. Now, I used to think, is there anything that Hamas can do in which they'll cross a red line that will receive universal condemnation? And the answer we got was no. Literally, there is no red line that they can cross which will draw universal condemnation. None. Is there a red line they did not cross? Right? Again, even to talk babies, pregnant women, rape, torture, kidnapping, murder. Right? There's not a single red line that they did not cross, and we came to the realization that even that will not bring condemnation. On the contrary, it emboldened anti-Semites. They were, in the words of one professor, exhilarated by it. They were enthused by it. They were liberated by it. Here, the anti-Semites around the world who have, on the college campuses, have been around for a long time. I've been to a number of college campuses throughout my 23 years here in the United States. I was in a Georgia Tech, was it, for Israel Apartheid Week. Right? And there's always that. I spoke at a university in England. There was a demonstration outside against the apartheid Zionist military rabbi. I was in the army as well, so they found that out. Right? So, we're familiar with that. But that people who we have considered somewhat civilized, who we consider to be with this, holding the same morals as we hold, yes, they're anti-Zionist and so on, but seriously crossing all those red lines, and they're still not only not condemning Hamas, they're actually supporting Hamas. Right? The United Nations is not a surprise. I mean, when you know of the resolutions of the General Assembly against various human rights abusers are in the either zero, right? Against North Korea, I think there's been 8 resolutions. Even against the United States, there's been 8 resolutions. I think against Iran, none. North Korea, Libya, etc., under 10. Against the state of Israel, about 160 to 170. Right, but that doesn't surprise me, because about 2/3 of the members of the United Nations are totalitarian dictatorships. Okay. Human Rights Commission, people who are on the Human Rights Commission, I think Iran is on the Women's Rights Commission of the United Nations. Iran. Okay. So, the United Nations doesn't surprise me, but the extent of outpouring of sympathy for the devil, sympathy for Hamas, support for Hamas has been traumatic as well. Right? Aside from, the human suffering of our brothers and sisters in Israel, beyond imagination. But this is something also that it's really have a hard time dealing with it. And it's not just Muslims. We'll talk about Muslims. It's not only Muslims. First of all, not all Muslims, but many, many Muslims, probably the majority, support Hamas. We know that in recent polls in Gaza, I think they say 72% of Gazans support what Hamas did on October 7th. 72%. And many of them participated, as we know, from videos they took themselves. We know that there is widespread support in many sectors in the West Bank as well. So Islam, but even Christianity. Again, not all Christians. There is a wonderful organisation, Christians United for Israel, Kufi. I've been to their conference. Amazing people. I have a close friend who's a pastor in Australia, heads a church there. He's been in constant email contact with me, and he said that when the war started, he started saying a blessing, the Mishabarach translation of the blessing we say in synagogue for the soldiers of the IDF. He has instituted in his church every Sunday morning. He even showed a video of the chief cantor of the IDF singing it to show them how it should be said. They don't have a good cantor at their church. So I turned down the job. But it is also shocking and disconcerting the amount of Christian support for Hamas, for BDS, for the destruction of the state of Israel. Where does that come from? And then it's not just the Muslims and the Christians. You also have the leftists. The far left, who I'm imagining many of them are probably atheist or agnostic. Many in the LGBTQ community, although there's no such thing really as the LGBT community because that's really lumping everyone together, but many of them are supporting Hamas protesting against Israel, which is really bizarre. Where does this come from? What? Why? You know, and I guess you could say, I mean, isn't that just anti-Semitism in general is a question that we've always had? Where does anti-Semitism come from? And there are components of it which are consistent. The intensity of it. When you speak to people about Israel, there's a hatred in their eyes. There's a passion they don't have about anything else. You could tell them in Yemen is probably one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the 21st century is happening right now in Yemen. Has anyone ever heard of this? Does anyone have the same passion about the Houthis causing starvation to millions? About Assad in Syria killing millions, gassing them, etc.? No, doesn't concern anyone. Right? Did you know Pakistan is in the process of expelling approximately 1.5 million, I think it is, Muslim Afghanistan refugees back to Afghanistan, many of them who fought against the Taliban, who are going back to certain death. Any protests about that? Any Muslims been protesting about the expulsion of 1.5 million Afghanistan refugees from Pakistan? No, this doesn't. The world doesn't, Harvard Square doesn't seem, Crimson does not seem to bother them. It only bothers people if the Jews do it. And that's very strange. I'd like to try to get to the bottom of that. And there are many, many possible reasons. But I think the primary reason is that the state of Israel, the Jewish people's success, the Jewish people's continuity, and the Jewish people's survival and thriving is a contradiction to these people's deeply held beliefs. Let's start with, let's go chronologically, Christianity. You may have heard of something called replacement theology. Replacement theology is that the church has replaced the synagogue, the New Testament replaced the Old, the 12 apostles replaced the 12 tribes, and the chosen people are now those who follow Jesus. And this was the view John Chrysostom, Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, and all of them, Chrysostom, Augustine, Aquinas, the great doctors of the Catholic Church, all said in different words, but they all said the reason the Jews were exiled from Israel, the reason the Jews lost their land, the reason the Jews lost their sovereignty was because the Jews rejected Jesus. And they're not going to get it back till they accept him. What happened in 1948? Now, David Ben-Gurion was not exactly a religious Jew, but he certainly did not accept Jesus. The state of Israel was established in 1948. That created a huge theological problem for many Christians. What was the theological problem? The Jews, who, as a student of mine, when I was talking about this, he said, so like we're frozen and they're chosen. I said, exactly. That's how they look at it. We're frozen, they're chosen. But what it looks like is that we're thawing out. Does it not look like that? 1948, the Jews come back to Israel en masse. That's a bad term, mass with an E at the end, right? We come back to Israel 1948, establish a Jewish state, and we did not accept Jesus at that point. So that's a real problem. Augustine would look at that and say, well, there's something wrong here. St. John Chrysostom looks at that and says, no, right? All these misfortunes that befell the Jews happened because they rejected Jesus. So when the Jews come back to Israel, that's a real problem for them. In fact, the Vatican redefined its prediction. They edited the prediction. They said what Augustine meant was the Jews would not get Jerusalem until they accepted Jesus. Well, what happened in 1967? Yes, exactly. The paratroopers did not run into the old city, right, yelling to the Lord. No, right, they did not accept. And guess what? Jerusalem came back into Jewish hands. This created the state of Israel. Has created a deep theological problem. It's a contradiction to their most basic held beliefs, because here are these people who they say were rejected by God, who were afflicted by God, who were exiled by God, and now they're back in their country. Not only that, reviving the Hebrew language. Not only that, but with more Torah being studied, Talmud, Mishnah, Torah being studied in Israel now than in any other time in history. There has never been more people, a greater percentage of the Jewish people involved in Judaism in deep, meaningful ways than currently in the state of Israel. So that's not disturbing to us, but that is deeply disturbing if you believe in replacement theology, because that looks like the replacement did not happen. So that means when the Jews are humiliated, when the Jews are defeated, when the state of Israel is brought to its knees, chas v'shalom, from the perspective, it may be even unconscious, by the subconscious. This may not even be on the surface. It may be deep down, but there's a certain delight that some people feel about that, because it confirms their, you see, they are in fact not the chosen people anymore. They are in fact, God has indeed rejected them. And so therefore there is a wave of support. And from the Muslim perspective, very, very similar. I'm sure you all know that in traditional Islam, there is an idea of the Jew and Christian as dima, or dhimmi, D-H-I-M-M-I. What that means is that Jews throughout history living under Muslims were considered to be a protected class who had the right to practice their religion, but an inferior class. As the Quran says, humiliation and wretchedness were stamped upon them because they rejected Allah and they rejected Muhammad. So humiliation and wretchedness, and that's why throughout history, Jews always had to pay what's called jizya. What is jizya? It was a special tax. Well, Christians also had to pay it. It was a special tax that monotheists, because we were not pagans, they didn't consider us pagans, but we were not Muslims, we had to pay a tax to the Muslim overlords. And there are laws in Sharia that required a certain level of humiliation on the part of the Jews living under the Muslims. And that was granted the brutality of Christianity in Europe. When you talk about whether it was the Crusades, 1096, the First Crusade, or whether it was the Spanish Inquisition, which went for not just Spain, but the Inquisition, which went for hundreds of years, or etc., or the pogroms, it was much worse on the whole. But I should point out, in Islamic history, the Jews, and there are times when 90% of the Jews lived under the Muslims, we always had to be on a lower level. Jewish homes were not allowed to be as high or higher than Muslim homes. Synagogues not allowed to be higher. There were many countries where Jews could not do celebrations in public. You're probably aware that it was a Muslim sultan who invented the yellow star. It was a yellow patch, not a star. But Jews under a sultan had to wear a yellow patch to indicate that they were Jews. Jews could not ride horses, only donkeys. Jews could not carry weapons. If a Jew was on the sidewalk and a Muslim was coming, the Jew had to go onto the street so the Muslim could pass on the sidewalk. This is not universal. The other universal aspect of this was jizya, because that's explicit in the Quran, not just the Hadith, and it's money. So that was universal. But there was a universal understanding of the Jews as being dima, the humiliated and wretched and beneath our feet. Then along comes the state of Israel. And the state of Israel, not only are the Jews in Israel not humiliated and wretched, but they are ruling over Arabs who live in the state of Israel. And not only that, but Israel defeats them in 6 wars, one after the other? And not only that, but there's a principle in Islam called Dar al-Harb and it's not a principle, it's a nomenclature, but Dar al-Harb means house of the sword. That means any area of the world that is not under Islamic control is called the house of the sword. And areas of the world under Islamic control are called Dar al-Islam, the house of peace or submission. That means the United States is technically Dar al-Harb, the house of the sword, because it's not under Islamic control, aside from Michigan, right? But in general, it's not. It's called the house of the sword. Now, Israel, that was a joke, by the way. I'm not running to joke, doesn't it? Right. But Israel, which was once under Islam for 500 years, under the Ottoman Empire, it was under the Mamluks, it was under the Abu Nasids, etc., Abbasids, etc. So for hundreds of years, Israel, right, was, as they would say, in its proper place, Dar al-Islam, under Islamic rule. Now, the Jews took over. The humiliated, wretched, who are supposed to be paying tribute to the Muslims, and these Jews are now living there proud. It's not a matter of amount of land. If the entire state of Israel would just be the few square miles of Tel Aviv, it would still be a problem for them. Why? Because in the state of Israel, we are standing proud. We are standing independent. We are not humiliated or wretched. We're not paying tribute to the Muslim overlords. This humiliation, national humiliation that is felt, is for many, many Muslims inconsolable, irreconcilable. Not all. We already, thank God, we have the Abraham Accords. There are many Muslims. I've been to Morocco, I've been to Egypt, I've been to Dubai. There are many Muslims who are, okay, they're more modern. Religion can be interpreted, and they do interpret it in a way that it's okay. But, unfortunately, the majority of Muslims, certainly those in the Middle East, feel very, very clearly that the state of Israel is a contradiction to their most deeply held beliefs in many ways. It's instead of being Dar al-Islam, house of Islam, it is now house of the sword. B, the Jews are not paying tribute to the Muslims. C, the Jews are not humiliated and wretched. And D, is also the Jews claim to be the true descendants of Abraham. The Muslims claim to be the true descendants of Abraham. In fact, the Muslim, in traditional Islam, there's a doctrine called tahrif. Tahrif is Arabic for distortion. Tahrif is the doctrine that the Jews' version of the Bible has been distorted by them. It's not the original. Our 5 books of Moses, they say, was distorted by us, was edited. We took out references to Muhammad, etc. We put in superstition. Tahrif. Right? So who are the true representatives of monotheism and of Abraham? They believe it's the Muslims. But Jews are in the land of Abraham. Jews rule the land of Abraham. Jews speak the language of Abraham. So this is disturbing. You can begin to understand the 1,000 years of history has been upended, overturned. 1,000 years of their faith has been to some degree refuted. This is both on the part of many Christians and on the part of Muslims, by the existence of the State of Israel and the success of the State of Israel. The military, the economic success, the social success, in every success, it's a problem. You hear what's going on here? And this may also, on the part, may be subconscious. The Talmud has a phrase, interesting phrase, talks about Daniel, who has a vision a horrific vision of beasts who symbolize various exiles of the Jewish people. And in the vision, it says, Daniel saw the vision and was very afraid. And his friends who were with him did not see it, but they were also afraid. So the Talmud says, well, if they didn't see the vision, why are they afraid? Right? I understand why Daniel, he sees this horrific vision, nightmare of these 4 beasts who are destroying the Jewish people, and he's overwhelmed with fear. But his friends, the Talmud says, didn't see it. Actually, in the book of Daniel, it says they didn't see it, but they were afraid anyway. So the Talmud says, Inhu lo chazu, they did not see it. Mazleihu chazu, their subconscious, their soul detected it. Sometimes you don't even realize what it is that you're scared of. You don't even realize what it is that causes the revulsion or the hate. And I think that's probably true for many Christians or Muslims. But there's something about the State of Israel that makes them very uneasy. Uneasy is an understatement of the century. But it makes them want it to go away, just to be destroyed. So that's the Muslims and the Christians. What about the leftists? What about atheists? Why is the State of Israel? You'd think Israel, I was talking to my son about it. he said, if the average college student from Tel Aviv University would meet with one of the average college students in any college in America, they'd have a lot in common. I mean, the guy's into the same music, guys at Tel Aviv University, into the same music, right? Into the same culture, right? Same TikTok stuff, that's it, right? It's just that the Tel Aviv University student does not want to die, and the other student wants him to die. Okay, but other than that, a lot in common. Right? So why are they so against Israel? Why are they sympathizing with Hamas? They don't have the theology of Christianity. They don't have the historical humiliation that Islam is feeling, or the theology. What is it that motivates them? So I think the idea is the following. Let's imagine, you don't have to imagine this. I know someone may have been to a place where anyone seen fossilized dinosaur bones? You go to the museum, you might see them. There was a place right near where I used to live in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem forest, where there was a stone, a large flat stone, which had actual fossilized footprints of a family of dinosaurs. It was very cool. Went down there with my kids. It's very cool. Now, you see fossilized dinosaur footprints. Is there a reason to be afraid? I mean, if they're fossilized, that means 20 million years at least. Right? Nothing to be afraid of. However, if you're on the beach in Costa Rica and you see three-toed dinosaur footprints in the wet sand, like your kid says, "Hey, that's a velociraptor," you have reason to be afraid. That's how the book Jurassic Park starts, by the way. It was a book before it was a movie, by the way. Okay. Tell your grandchildren what books are. But anyway, so you have reason to be afraid. Now, see, the Jews, in the minds of many, many people, atheists, leftists, are an anachronism. We should not be around. What do you mean? That we should be in the museum with the Etruscans, right? I mean, I took a group of Israeli students of mine on a tour of the Met in New York, right? And they're walking around, they're saying, "Rabbi, where's all the Jewish stuff?" I said, "It's not here, we're using it." Right? Because we're not in the museum, but they see us as this ancient, we should be fossilized. And this is actually stated. There was a famous historian, Arnold Toynbee. Arnold Toynbee wrote a book. It's called A Study of History on the Rise and Decline of 23 Civilizations. It's a gripping title. You can see it's on the bestseller list in Amazon. Right? 8 volumes. 8 volumes. No one's read it. I don't think Toynbee read it. Anyway, but Arnold Toynbee he said that the Jews are a fossil, he used the term, Jews are a fossil civilization. History is the rise and fall of civilizations. Civilizations, he says, rose in response to a set of challenges of extreme difficulty. Creative minorities devised solutions that reorientated their society. When a civilization responds to its challenges, it grows. When it fails to respond, it enters a period of decline. He says civilizations die from suicide, not by murder. And he said, in his opinion, Jews are a fossil civilization. He said this in the 1930s. He did visit Germany. He spoke with Hitler. He was one of the apologists. But he wasn't your classic anti-Semite, but he said the Jews should not be around. They're basically fossils. And in a debate, I think it was 1945, with Yaakov Herzog, he actually said that Jews who have a brain in their head at this point will just do what fossils are meant to do and just lie down and that's it, over. And of course, 3 years later, much to Arnold Toynbee's horror, the Jews have a state. Jews have a state. The state of Israel is a little bit, actually it's a major problem for someone who doesn't believe there's anything special about the Jews. Someone who believes that the Jews are some ancient civilization that should have just been fossilized and rolled over and played dead a long time ago. Someone who believes Jews should be in a museum. Someone who believes that the state of Israel, there was maybe a Jewish state, who knows how long ago, but it shouldn't be around now. And yet here we are, in the immortal words of Abba Eban. Abba Eban, one of the great Israeli diplomats probably the greatest Israeli diplomat as a speaker who ever existed. He says, Professor Toynbee fails to substantiate the fossil theory, despite the fact that it's the absolute premise and starting point of his entire history of the world. He says, but the fossils, not having read Arnold Toynbee's 8 volumes, remain unaware of their own petrification. Just to translate that, we fossils haven't read his books. We are unaware that we're fossilized. We continue. It clings to its sense of mission and strives for national restoration. The Jewish people's return to Israel, the Jewish people's revival of an ancient language, something unprecedented, both unprecedented. The return to Israel, unprecedented amongst the history of nations. The revival of Hebrew, unprecedented. The revival of the whole Jewish state in Israel is just incredible. It's hard to find a natural explanation for it. And it's the type of thing that might bother someone whose belief is that the Jews are fossils, anachronistic, nothing special. There is no such thing as a God, no such thing as miracles, no such thing as divine providence. Well, guess what, folks? The state of Israel is in your face, declaring that that's not true. Whether it was the creation of Israel in 1948, the 6-Day War, the 73 War, right? It's incredible. The economy that Israel has built, the fact that there are Jews in Israel, and by the way, 1948 to let's say the 1950s, Israel absorbed 100% of its population size. There are 600,000 Jews in Israel. In the space of about 6 years, they absorbed another 600,000 Jews. And the 600,000 Jews were from a crazy variety of ethnicities. Right? There were Jews, Ashkenazi Jews from Germany and Russia and Czech Republic, then it was Czechoslovakia, and France, etc. And there were Jews, Arabic-speaking Jews from Libya and Syria. And there were Jews from Yemen. And there were Jews from literally all over the world. The fact that there has not been a coup in Israel, although I once asked an officer of mine in the army why there hasn't been, there's so many people under armed with weapons, why has there ever been a coup? He said, it's simple. He said, in a coup you need 3 people to agree. Not going to get that. But despite that, Israel has produced a successful culture, successful society. That's incredible. And that's a contradiction to their beliefs as well. If you are marching around at Rutgers or Harvard or Cambridge or whatever, right, and deep set within you, there's built certain beliefs. One of those beliefs is there is no God, there's no such thing as miracles, and the Jews are out of fashion. So the state of Israel is very much a contradiction to that. Not only that, but if you believe, as many, many minorities believe, that once you have been oppressed, you remain a victim forever, and everything you do can be exempted and excused because you've been a victim, well, the Jews are a bit of a problem for that theory. Because have we been ever victimized? What do you think? Jews ever been victimized? And how are we doing? Economically, academically, right? Socially, we're doing damn well. Right? So the Jews have not been walking around saying, yeah, well, we were victimized with this pogrom, there's this and that. You know what? We went forward and we rebuilt. We built Judaism in America. We built the state of Israel. We built Judaism all over the world. That's disturbing. That's disturbing because that refutes your theories. That refutes your beliefs. And so I think that's what it's all about. I think it's about theologies which have been refuted. It's about beliefs that have been refuted. And it's the existence of the Jewish people that bothers people. Is there a solution to this? There is a solution, right? First of all, we do see that there are people on our side, even in the Muslim world. There are people on our side in the Christian world. And true liberals, and I distinguish that from leftists, are also, to a great degree, on the side of Israel and on the side of the Jewish people. It is our job is to unite as Jews. It is our job to also, and this is so basic, which is this, and I'm going to finish with this. It's the idea of hope, tikva. So the Jewish people are founded on the fact that we have hope. I just heard a wonderful idea from Rav David Lichtenstein, who mentioned that in Hebrew, classical Hebrew, in the Torah, there's probably about 5 or 6 synonyms for hope. Tikva, liyachel, yachel Yisrael el Hashem, shomrim laboker, aviv shomar es hadavar. There's no word in classical Hebrew which is the opposite of hope. There's a word yi'ush, giving up. That's only found in later sources. It's not found in the Tanakh. In the Torah, prophets and writings, there are about 5 or 6 different words for hope. There's no word for the opposite. Jews have, and the word hope is, what's the word for hope? The classic word for hope in Hebrew is tikva. Tikva, what's the middle 2 letters of tikva? Kuf, vav, kav. What's a kav? A line. Tikva is the line that joins us to the future. Because we believe in God and the Jewish people, so we have optimism. If you don't believe in God, there's no reason for optimism. Nietzsche felt that optimism was an evil. Evil. Many, many philosophers felt that. And yeah, because if they didn't believe in God, why would you have hope? Why was there any reason for optimism? Human beings have done some terrible stuff, worse than any animals. Right? So where's the reason for optimism? The reason for optimism is because we have tikva. That's why we got the Israel back. Think of it. Right? What connected us to the land of Israel? We were all over the world. Jews in New Zealand. There's a synagogue in a place called Christchurch, New Zealand, for heaven's sakes. Right? Jews in New Zealand. Right? I'm not a fan of New Zealand, I'm just saying. Right? New Zealand, I'm from Australia. So Jews in New Zealand, Jews in Ethiopia, Jews all over the world. Right? What connected us? So let me end. There's a principle in Jewish law like this. Let's say you get into a subway, Grand Central Station, New York, 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Monday afternoon. And as the doors close, you look at the platform and you notice that you dropped your phone. Oh, God. Now, so would you go to the next station, push your way through the crowd, get out of the train, go under the tracks, right? Come up on the other side, take the train back, go under the tracks again. Do you think you'll find your phone? What's the probability of finding your phone?
0.
Close to 0. Yeah, close to 0. Right. Now, that phone is no longer yours. You know why? You've done something called yi'ush. You've given up hope. Given up hope. If you dropped your phone here, you go out to your car, you're driving halfway home, you say, left my phone, right? What's the chance that you'll get it back? Yeah, I would say close to 100%, yeah. No one's going to call you because you don't have your phone, but when you get back here, you'll get it, right? Now, there was a great Hasidic Rebbe, he was a Kloisenberger. He said something like this. He said, that phone that you dropped here, it's still your phone. It's not in your property, it's not under your control, and it's not in your possession. What connects you to that phone? He said the answer is what connects you to that phone is the hope that you'll get it back. That's the kav. By the way, kav in modern Hebrew is a phone line. Excuse the pun. But the line that connects me to my phone that I lost is the hope that I'm going to get it back. What's the line that connected the Jewish people to the land of Israel for thousands of years that we've been exiled from there? For the 2,000 years after the Romans threw us out. You know the line that connected us to Israel? It wasn't Becher. Right? It wasn't Edison. It was the line, the hope, the kav, the line of hope that connected us. And the reason we have hope is because, and the reason Jews are optimistic, and as Golda Meir once said, Jews don't have the luxury of being pessimists. We don't have that luxury. We're always optimistic. But the reason, and in Israel, one of the most common phrases in Israel, which you're probably not hearing as much now, but you do hear it, is Yeh Tov. It'll be good. Yeh Tov. It'll be good. There's an optimism. That optimism comes from our deep-set belief in God and in the fact that we are His people and that we do have a destiny and we see that destiny unfolding. And yes, we've had some terrible, terrible bumps on the way, and calling them bumps is a disservice, but we've had some terrible events that have prevented us, but nothing ever will prevent us from achieving our destiny. The fact that there are now something like 45% or so of the Jewish population of the world is in the land of Israel, living in a state of Israel, speaking the Hebrew language, that's unbelievable. If you would have told a Jew 200 years ago, he would have said, what are you, crazy? He wouldn't have believed you. Well, maybe he would have. If he was a religious Jew, he would have believed you. He said, oh, the Mashiach is here? We would say, not yet, but we're on the way. We're on the way. And that's the hope that we have. So yeah, it's a terrible situation. And yes, our existence is a thorn in the side of many, many people, as we have explained. But our existence and what's happening and their hatred for us, that actually should give us even more hope. I'll tell you why. Because what for them are the footsteps of a monster, of a dinosaur, is for us the footsteps of the Messiah. What for them indicates a destruction of their worldview is for us a confirmation of our worldview. What for them causes them to lose hope and belief in it, whether it's in the Quran or in Augustine or Chrysostom, etc., causes us greater belief in the Torah. And that is our hope. That is our tikvah. And it's not by chance. The national anthem of Israel is HaTikvah, right? But it is that tikvah, that hope of 2,000 years that has connected us to Israel and connects us to the future and will ensure that this too, we will not only survive through this, but we will succeed and we will thrive and we will show the entire world that we are indeed the eternal people. As Samuel the prophet put it, V'gam, and indeed, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. Netzach Yisrael means, what does Netzach mean? Victory. What else does it mean? Eternity. What else does it mean? It's a name for God. So when Samuel said, Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, God of Israel does not lie, the eternity of Israel is not a lie, and the victory of Israel is not a lie. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. Netzach and Am Yisrael Chai is the idea. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know if we have time for questions. Sure. Questions, heckling, alternate speeches, political endorsements. Oh, thank you very much. Yes?
So, I know the Muslims hate the Jews and the Christians hate the Jews, but why don't the Muslims hate the Christians and the Christians
Again, not all Muslims, not all Christians, but yes, many, right? They do. It's just that the Jews are the more immediate problem. But look, a church was vandalized and burnt down by Muslim immigrants 2 days ago in Italy. In Toronto, Palestinian protest surrounded a Santa, terrorizing Santa and the children. So it's Christians are being slaughtered in Sudan. Christians in Bethlehem at the beginning of the century had a large Christian population. It has been decimated by the Muslims there. So do not think that there is no hatred and there is no problems there. There's problems there as well. They see the long plan, the long term. They want world conquest. Islam originally started, the truth is so did Christianity. Constantine becomes Christian. The might of the Roman Empire, politically, militarily, and economically, is now behind Christianity. It wasn't like guys come into your house dressed nicely Sunday morning, right? They look like yeshiva guys, but they don't have a yarmulke, right? So you know they're missionaries, right? And they say, hey, thought of Christianity? No. It was a crusader with a sword held to your throat, say, ever thought of Christianity, sir? I said, yes, fascinated by it, yeah, etc. Right? That's how it expanded. That's how Islam expanded as well. The only reason it hasn't expanded that way is Judaism. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was reading today that the Haredi population in Israel is getting more close to the general population, and many more Haredis are joining what they would not normally in the past, especially those not studying Torah anymore.
Yeah, there are some silver linings, right? And as rough as the situation is, there have been one silver lining has been that Israel was in one of the most fractured situations it's ever been in just 3 months ago. Unimaginable divisions. And now there is an incredible, not complete because we're still Jewish after all, but there's an incredible increase in the sense of unity And yes, even those who were very insular and were not willing to compromise on, but there is an expansion of that. Yeah, absolutely. We have seen that. Yes?
Well, the evangelical Christians are very much for Israel.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah,
and
2-5.
I do not feel that most Christians are anti-Semitic. Do you?
I don't think, no, I didn't say most, but there are many who are. There are official church bodies like the Baptist Convention who support BDS. There are various Catholic organizations who've also supported BDS. So I don't know if it's the majority. I hope it's not. But there are many who do support that. And I was trying to explain those who do. The evangelicals and also Christians United for Israel and Pastor Hagee, for example, who actually spoke at the rally in DC, explicitly, and I heard him say this, he says, I do not believe, and most of us do not believe in the replacement theology. So if you don't believe in if they don't believe in replacement theology, there's no reason for them to hate us. But you have to remember, there is a long tradition in Christianity of the accusation of the Jews as being the killers of Jesus.
They dispelled that with Nostra. More recent time.
No. The Catholic Church did write that, but that does not contradict my statement. My statement was that there is a long history of that belief in Christianity. That is still true, despite Nostra, right? So that is true. And that long history is in Europe especially, is very, very deeply embedded in the culture, especially in Eastern Europe, Poland, for example, also in the Russian Orthodox Church. And there's a lot of them. Right? And that is something which we have to contend with and we have to understand. Again, it's not all. You can't paint everyone with the same brush. And there's over 2,000 sects of Christianity, so it's difficult to say, But yes, there is a long tradition of that type of looking at the Jews and the myths that were believed in medieval Europe about the Jews in terms of blood libels, etc. By the way, some of them are still believed. Some of them are still believed by Christians and in various parts of Europe. So it's a concern. It's not something we can dismiss. Again, I don't claim every Christian, and as I said, my good friend the pastor, Mike Rolls in Australia, is obviously his whole congregation is not like that, and there are many like that. But it's a concern, and we do have to explain those who do hate us. Yeah.
If you're explaining that the Muslim attitude toward the Jews is like, humiliate them and they should be subjugated and the wrath and all this, why are the Jews so moral and just and polite and sweet? Like, why don't we take this stance and humiliate them and say, wipe them out, they did this to us? Why are we so calm and patient with them and sweet and it's so nice,
Well,
do those things?
We do act in self-defense. I mean, the army is not sweet, but on the other hand, the army is. We do believe in morality, and it's interesting. We just finished Hanukkah, right? So people are aware of that, I'm sure. Right? Had your requisite amount of donuts. Okay, so on Hanukkah we say a prayer, Al Hanissim, the miracles that you do for us. Now, Al Hanissim goes through. It says the following. It says, you put the many into the hands, delivered the many into the hands of the few. Is that miraculous? Miraculous. You delivered the strong into the hands of the weak. Miraculous. Then it says, you delivered the evil into the hands of the righteous. You delivered the callous into the hands of the pious. Why is that miraculous? What's miraculous about that? I understand the many into the hands of the few, miraculous. The weak, the strong into the hands of the weak, miraculous. But why is it that the evil into the hands of the righteous is miraculous? And I think there's many explanations for it, but I'm usually right. But I think the explanation is, why'd you laugh? Right. Okay. Anyway, but I think the explanation is that really, from a perspective of just pure physical battles, if someone has no moral constraints, they are evil, they don't care what they do and who they do, are they more likely to win than someone who has actual moral constraints? The answer is yes. So it's also miraculous that the Jewish people have won, that the Maccabees won, because the Maccabees had some level of morality, right? And they were fighting against people who didn't care what they did. We are in a similar situation. We are fighting against people who have no moral constraints whatsoever. But that does not mean that we should abandon our moral constraints. And that's something which I think we're very proud of. The Israeli army, IDF, first of all, there are halachic authorities, Roshal Yisraeli, amongst others, who maintain that since we are signatories to the Fourth Geneva Convention and to other conventions of war, we are obligated by Torah law to obey that. So that's something to keep in mind. There are Torah laws. And by the way, the fact that a lot of people have, anyone read the Fourth Geneva Convention? Yeah, probably not. Okay, I read it. Right. First of all, it does not require Israel to supply anything to the civilian population of Gaza. It obligates the army to allow the transit of goods to the civilian population. But when you read it, that's assuming that three conditions are met. If you have good reason to suspect that the foreign or the enemies will steal the civilian provisions, you don't have to allow transit. Reason to suspect that with Hamas? Right? If you have reason to believe that the supplies will not be under civilian control, you don't have to allow transit. Reason to believe that? Okay. And if you believe that the stuff you're allowing transit of will be used for the war effort against you, you also don't have to allow. So even according to the agreement, that's number one. Number two, we talk about, according to the Geneva Convention, you're not allowed to attack a civilian hospital. Makes sense, understood. Absolutely, right? However, if the hospital is being used, according to the Geneva Convention, it says this explicitly, if the hospital is being used as a base of operations against your army, as long as you give warning, you are allowed to attack it. So Israel is conforming to the Geneva Convention, and that's important, right? That's maybe a halachic obligation, etc. But I should point out one more thing. And my son, who's currently serving in Gaza in the paratroopers, he said to me, because we discuss this a lot, we talk about this stuff, and so one of the things he said to me, he says, you also have to consider the impact of immoral actions on the person doing it. He says, Israel's a tiny country. Now, in the United States, it's a huge country. What's the population? Close to 400 million? 350 million. How many people in the army? 2%. Tiny amount, right? You could go your entire life without knowing anyone who served in the army, right? You could. They're not. Right? You have no idea, right? So in Israel, we're talking about 7 million people. Almost everyone serves in the army, right? Do I want to have people who have done acts of cruelty, immorality, etc. in my family? And say, we don't want that, right? So we do have moral constraints, and we're not going to descend to their level, right? This doesn't mean we're not going to fight. We do fight, right? Unfortunately, mistakes can be made as well, as we saw tragically, horrifically, and it's hard to judge someone in the battlefield combat situation. So these are things. That's why we don't do that. From the Torah perspective, from the perspective of what it will do to our people. Golda Meir said it really just incredibly. She once said, even if I could forgive the Arabs for killing our children, I could never forgive them if they turned our children into killers. Very profound and very, very Jewish and very true. So that's not what we want to become. And I can tell you, just from having been in the army and from having 2 sons in the army, 3, but 2 currently. So, and I'm sure a lot of you would know this. Everyone's probably met this. These are not people who it's not like some, and no offense to any, but there are certain people, I know in Australia, we call them bogans. Anyone heard of that term? Probably not. In America, you call them rednecks. Bogans, right? So, who are just waiting for the next time they can fill out their gun. No, is there a war? Let's go! Right? This is not what, most people are not like that. But if there's any rednecks here, I apologize, and I take it back completely. Right? But again, we're not out there. We're reluctant warriors. We're good warriors, but we're reluctant warriors. And in fact, the Torah tells us, after commanding the Jewish army to go to war, there's a blessing that God says, "V'natan lacha Hashem Elokim rachamim v'richamecha," which means God will give you mercy and have mercy on you. So one of the commentaries, I believe it's the Or HaChaim, he says, what is the double expression? God will give you mercy and have mercy on you. So he says this, it's a special blessing because when the Torah commands us to go to war, the risk is that we become callous. We become, it affects you. You can't help but affect you. There's a blessing. If you go to war for the right reasons, God will not only have mercy on you, but natan lecha rachamim, he'll give you the quality of mercy as well. It's something, so you're right. No mercy on a Hamas combatant, absolutely not. But when it comes to acting the way they do, we do not do that. We don't do that. Yes, other question. Yes, one more.
You mentioned before that 70% of Palestinians supported Hamas.
In Gaza.
No, I can drill down further. That was taken in the West Bank and Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
The percentage in the West Bank was higher. The good Palestinians was about like 78% to
Right.
70%. It was
Correct.
there was more support in the survey from the West Bank.
And I think there's a simple reason for that.
What do you think?
Well, there's a simple reason for that. Because, who is suffering most from what Hamas did? The Palestinians in Gaza. Right? So obviously, if there's going to be less support, you'd expect it there because they're seeing the effects. As in the immortal words, I think it was, I saw a monologue by Bill Maher, which was excellent. And he quoted Dr. Phil. I know I'm quoting Bill Maher and Dr. Phil. I mean, how far we have fallen. But I went from the Torah to, okay, but he says, they made war against us in 48, they lost. 67, they lost. It's at every war. And as Dr. Phil says, how's that working out for you? It's not working out well for them. They have to give up on the idea of destroying Israel and living alongside Israel instead of living instead of Israel. Right? If once they actually put all of that energy, and they're smart people and they have resources, if they would put all of that energy and all of the money they've received into building a good economy and a good education system, a good infrastructure, instead of putting it into trying to destroy the Jews, they would have a good life. They would have a good life. So that's a problem. That has to change. I don't know how to do that. It's above my pay grade, like most things. But nevertheless, that's how I would explain that difference. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Rabbi.
There are refreshments next door if you'd like to avail yourselves of them.